Okay, I'm going to go through the notes and hopefully this will take care of any questions. I think looking at the notes themselves will do a pretty good job, but just in case, we'll go over this. I'm going to talk about four things: frequency distributions, graphs, distribution shapes, and percentile ranks. First of all, frequency distributions are just ways to summarize and organize data so you can get a lot of data, individual data points, into a digestible format. And we can have it in a table form like this, where, well, we'll talk about what these are. Or it can look graphic like this, and this is just a typical histogram or bar graph, depending on what it's supposed to represent. Note that each of these represent the same numbers, okay? And we'll talk about how this works. Frequency distributions combine a bunch of different numbers into different categories and tell you how many of them that there are. So if I have this data here, right, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 1, and so on, I have 20 total scores in here. If I want to organize it into a frequency distribution, my X column tells me what values I might have. So if I look at all these numbers, right, they range from 1 to 5. My F column is my frequency column, and it tells me how many I have of each one. So if I wanted to, I could always decompose this table into its raw form, back into these numbers. But I would do it in a much more organized way. First I'd look at how many ones I have. I have 2 ones, right? Then I have 5 twos. Then I have 6 threes, 5 fours, and then 2 fives. So these numbers are the same ones that I have up here. It's just that it's a lot easier to look at when I'm looking at a table. Now, the things that I want you to know how to do is to find, first of all, the number of scores that I have. So if I said how many individual scores are represented in this table, to do that, you look at the frequency column, and again, it tells you how many scores of each value you have. So 3 plus 1 plus 10 plus 0 plus 6 equals 20 again. Again, if I wanted to decompose these into their actual numbers, I would have 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, no 2s, and then 10 threes. Oops, one too many columns there. 1 4, and 3 5s. Let's move this guy out of the way. Oops. No, it's not letting me. There we go. Okay, so I want you to know how to find out how many people are there. I also want you to find out what the sum of all these scores are. Now, the fail-safe way, and the slowest way really, is to decompose it back into its original form like this, and then just add them up. But an easier way for me to do it is to just multiply across the columns. And in this example here, I have 4 5s, so I'm going to just multiply 5 times 4. Then I have 2 4s, 2 times 4 is 8. I have 8 3s, 3 times 8 is 24, and so on. And I find out that my sum of x is 60. If I wanted to do it for this one, oops. There we go. Didn't want to do that. I want to go to the right of this column. There we go. If I wanted to do it here, it would be 5 times 3 is 15, 4 times 1 is 4, 3 times 10 is 30. 0 times 2, again, I don't have any 2's, and then 1 times 6 is 6. So if I add all these up, I have 55. 30 plus 6 is 36, plus 4 is 40, plus 15 is 55. So that's my sum of x. Then to just find the average, if I give you one of these tables, I want you to just be able to add them all up and divide by the total number of scores that you have. So in this case, right, I have 20 scores. My sum of x is, just like we did last week with summation notation, is 60. Divide that by 20, my average is 3. Now, suppose that I wanted to know what percentage of people were at particular values. And it could apply to talking about how many people passed the course, how many people qualified for special ed, how many people were kind of within a certain range for health insurance or whatever. I just want to know what the relative percentage is. How many of my employees are men or women or have a high school diploma or anything like that. Relative frequency then represents the number of scores at a given value relative to all the scores. They're usually represented as a proportion or a percent. Proportions are really just the same thing as percentages, and they're usually expressed in decimal form rather than in like whole numbers. So proportions are calculated by just taking my frequency value for a particular score and dividing it by the total number of scores that I have. Just how you calculate a percentage. So in our example, for x equals 4, going back to here, right, I have 5 out of 20. That's not the right example. In this case, I would have 2 out of 20, which would give me 10%. This example, I must have had a different example in here. Sorry about that. For x equals 4, assuming that I had 5 4s, divide them by 20, gives me a quarter or 0.25. So this is my proportion, 0.25. If I want to change that to a percent, well then I just multiply it by 100 and add the percent sign. Note that if you say 0.25%, it will be wrong because this represents 25%, so make sure that you are able to tell the difference between the two, because 25% is a lot different than 0.25%. But I think this is kind of a review for things that you already know anyway. The way that we're going with all this is that we're going to ultimately be talking about probabilities, and proportions and probabilities, proportions and percentages can be talked about as probabilities. And the idea here is that if we pick one student at random from these 20 students, say, what is the probability that student will have a score of 4? Well, picking students at random, right, I have equal chances of getting anyone. Well, 5 of those options that I could get out of these 20 students have a value of 4. So I have 5 chances out of 20 that I will get somebody with a score of 4. I can reduce that to 1 over 4 or 0.25 or 25%. And we're going to, when we go forward to inferential statistics, everything becomes based on probabilities. We always are testing whether or not the data we get is something we should get under certain circumstances, or is it kind of weird, meaning that something's fishy's going on. But we'll talk more about that later. A frequency distribution table often includes both of these things, or one of them, the proportion and the percentage. And again, this is pretty straightforward, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Now, for exercise 1, I would rather have you do this in Excel. So, if you have Excel on your computer, I would like you to enter these numbers into an Excel file. Just going 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 6, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 2, 6, 4, 5. And I missed some in there. I missed a 4 and a 3. I think. Oh, jeez. Yeah, it's not the easiest thing in the world. Let's see, so 4, 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 2, 6, 4, 5. There we go. Okay, and what I'm going to do here is we're going to make a frequency table using something called pivot tables. And if you have a Mac, it's one thing. If you have Windows, it's another thing. So what I'm going to do actually is open up Windows on my computer and show you where the menus are in both of them. Now, the Windows menu has an advantage over the Mac menus in that it allows you to do something that we're going to get to a little later on. If you just bear with me. Takes a little while sometimes. And it shouldn't matter whether you're using Windows 7, whether or not you have Excel 2007 or 2010. It should really come out to be the same. Okay, so I'm just going to have a new file here. Okay, so I think I can copy and paste across these things rather than having to enter it all in again. Nope. You can do it in Word, which is nice, but I guess you can't do it. Oh no, you can do it across Excel. There we go. So that's good. Let me see here. Alright, well, my little mouse options aren't really working well. So, anyway, what I want you to do is insert a cell right above. Put an X in there because this is going to be our X value, X variable. I want you to shift things down. And then if you have a Mac, I want you to go to the Data tab, and there's this thing called a pivot table. And I want you to create an automatic pivot table by highlighting the data. And it'll kind of build this thing automatically for you. If you're using Windows, it's a little bit different. You go to the Insert tab, and then you have Pivot Table there. Here you can select your range, and then we can put it in this existing worksheet. We don't have to go to a different one, or we can have it open up a new worksheet. And actually, we'll do it that way. Now note that in Excel, it doesn't do anything for you automatically. And you are left to kind of do things for yourself. Now, in either case, what I want to do is I want to get my X in my row label. And see, the Mac version did it for me automatically, right? I have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are the values that I had in all those numbers that I entered in here. The second thing I want to do, if I'm in Windows or in Mac, I want to put the X into the values thing. And what this gives me, it adds up all my X's that are equal to 2. But I don't want that. I want the count. So if I click on this arrow, oops, and I change it from sum to count, it's going to give me basically my frequency table. And I'll do the same thing in the Mac by dragging the X, come on, dragging X down into here, changing this from sum to average, and so on. Or not average, sum to count. There we go. Alright, so I have the same thing in both cases. And if I wanted to, I could make a graph out of this. So we'll make a graph really quick. If you're using Windows, you go to the Insert tab, and you can highlight your data. And you can make it a bar graph. You can make it with these cones. We'll make it a 3D cylinder graph. Isn't that nice? And what this gives me is it gives me my frequency table, right? I have 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6s, and then here it tells me how many I have. I have, looks like I have 2 2s, but that's hard to read actually, so I'm going to change that to just a flat bar, make it easier to read for me for right now. I have 2 2s, 6 3s, 7 4s, 3 5s, and 2 6s. And if I want to, I can change the colors, and I can add little effects. The black backgrounds are nice. Maybe I want them to be red. Same thing happens in the Mac, and if I want to do it in the Mac, I just have this charts tab instead, so they're a little bit different. But the options are basically the same. Oops, that's not what I want. I just want a regular. Now this isn't giving me what I want.